Okay, what's up, guys? We're live. Welcome to the live hour. Uh, it's an impromptu show. I know. Usually, obviously, our typical show is on Sunday, but there is something to talk about. There is much to talk about. So, as I always promise you guys, whenever there's something to talk about, I'll be live. And what are we talking about today? Prime Minister Carney is off on a trip. He's going to India, he's going to Australia, and he's going to Japan over the next 8 days. Starting tomorrow up until March 7th, the Prime Minister is off to these countries. Um, and it's interesting. The readout just from the Prime Minister's office is saying the Prime Minister will visit Mumbai and then New Delhi in India, where he will meet Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And they'll focus on elevating and expanding Canada-India relations. With regards to his trip to Australia, the Prime Minister will travel to India and Canberra in Australia to meet with their Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, to deepen cooperation on defense, maritime security, critical minerals, trade, and advanced technologies, including AI. And when the Prime Minister heads to Tokyo in Japan, he will meet with their Prime Minister, Takaichi Sene, the newly elected Prime Minister, in their office. Prime Minister Carney will meet with their Prime Minister to strengthen mutual investments and partnerships in clean energy, advanced manufacturing, critical minerals, and food security. So that is what's going on. But today I want to focus on this the trip to India in particular, and I'll tell you guys why that is important in a sec. But the trip to India, I think, is probably the most complicated of the trips of the stops that the prime minister is making on this particular trip abroad. And you guys know what? It's very common knowledge at this point. We see the Indian government because allegedly orchestrated the killing of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil. And obviously that was an accusation that was made. The Indian government obviously denied that, and there was a bit of like, we threw out their diplomats from here. They had their own reaction to that, and we're in this situation where Canada is looking to diversify trade, and India is one of those gi- not gigantic like China and the United States, but big enough that we should be in those markets. Now we're trying to sign a comprehensive agreement with India. So that's kind of the lowdown of what's going on. Obviously, as you guys get in, let me know. Let me know who's live with me. You guys say hello in the comments, okay? Say hello in the comments. Obviously, I want to get you guys involved in the conversation tonight. You guys just when as you get in, just say hello. Say hello to me, okay? Say hello to me. So, why am I talking about? Why is this India trip? Um, but why do Canadians even want a trade deal with India? That is the premise of our discussion today. Do Canadians, as I say, as you guys get in, just say hello to me in the comments. Do Canadians want a trade deal with India? That is the question. And the reason why I ask this is because we obviously had a lot of people flip out about Canada's deal with China. We had a whole flip out about that because a lot of people said it's a security risk, and obviously the prime minister himself admitted on the routes on the election trail, on the campaign trail, that China is a security risk to Canada. Um, and a lot of people question that deal with China because of so many things, including they basically kidnapped two Canadian citizens, Canadian diplomats, off the streets in China, imprisoned them for a while. The two Michaels are the people I'm referring to here. All of those things. They're also China is also accused of interfering in our elections. So there's many issues that we have with China, right? There are many issues that we have with China. But the reason why I'm talking about this is because similar to the problems we have with China, we have many problems with India as well. We have many problems with India. I was talking earlier about the fact that the Indian government may or may not have been complicit in the killing of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil. They describe that Canadian citizen, his name Habib Sim Niger, they describe that Canadian citizen as a. Just realized my mic may not be working correctly there. Anyways, the Indians describe that particular Canadian citizen as a terrorist, right? That's what they describe that Canadian citizen as. Um, and so it's kind of a curious thing. So all the problems, the reason why we need to talk about this is all the problems that we described as what we have with India in terms of security situation, we have with China, you could argue, right? Because today, there are accusations that the Indian government continues to sponsor or allow stroke be complicit in the threats being leveled against the Sikh community here in Canada. There are obviously extortion rings that run amok in our country at the moment, in places like British Columbia and Surrey, British Columbia, in places like Brampton, those kinds of all that crime and gang violence have been imported, are being perpetrated there, whatever you want to call it. So, my point here is that all the problems that we say we had with China, with a deal with China, you could argue we still have those same problems with India, right? That's my whole point. We say China may or may not have interfered in our elections in the past. Well, a while back, if you guys can catch your mind back, there were accusations that India was actually involved in interfered in the conservative race, in the conservative leadership race, the race that brought in Pierre Polyev, coincidentally. And so, all the things, my point here to you guys, all the things that we accuse China of, all the things that were seemingly a stumbling block for people when Carney signed that deal with China are arguably stumbling blocks in this deal with India. So that's where we start today. I want you guys to kind of give me your thoughts on this. Would you like to see kind of you guys get in the comments? Everybody's welcome. Obviously, I want to have a conversation with you guys. Not, I don't want to have the. I would prefer not to have the one-way conversation today. Given all the problems that Canada has with India, I mean, as I said, we had similar issues with China, and people flipped out about Canada's deal with China. Would you be okay, as Canadians, would you be okay with Canada signing a deal with India? Because I mean that is probably on the table in this trip that Carney is taking to India. That is probably on the table. There's probably a deal on the table there for possibly a trade deal that can be done between Canada and India. So, would you like to see a deal done between Canada and India? That is my question to you guys. You guys get in the comments, join the conversation. I want to hear from you guys about this. I want to hear from you guys about this. It's interesting because obviously I've often said that obviously I've been honest with you guys and saying I think that as a country we do need to find a way to make, whether we like it or not, China, India, and the United States are three of some of the biggest economies in the world. And this, my position is not a secret here. We have to make a deal with these countries. However, there are legit stumbling blocks in terms of like, okay, you can't just allegedly kill a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil, right? But obviously, I mean, I say that that's a little bit one-sided. Obviously, the Indians also have their own irritants with Canada. For example, they say that the Indians say on their side that Canada is very much encouraging, stroke not dissuading the Sikh separatists within Canada. And obviously, if you tie when you tie that into the India bombings of the I want to say 1982 now, or somewhere in the 80s, when you tie that into that particular incident, you kind of understand why the Indians are a little bit sensitive about the movement of the Sikhs in Canada. That said, on the Canadian side, the Sikhs have said, well, they have been subject to a lot of threats and a lot of meddling and interference from the Indian states. Hey, Justin, man, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show, man. So, what are we? As I said, what we're talking about today. What we're talking about today. Do Canadians want a trade deal with India? And I premise this on the fact that all the problems that we seem to have with China in the first place, when all the things that made some people flip about the deal with China, you could argue they are present in our relationship with India as well, right? They're present here as well because I mean, if when people accuse China of interfering in our elections, there were suggestions that India may have interfered in the conservative leadership race. That is interference in our democratic process, right? We talk about the possibility of violence. Yeah. So Justin Man, that's where I'm going. So Justin Man is asking me what is the reason not to. As I said, I am in favor of having to deal with India because as I said, they're one of the biggest economies in the world. They're one of the biggest markets. Why not? But as I said, there are a few stumbling blocks there, Justin Man, and for every other person watching, you guys, I want to know your thoughts. What is the stuff if you're against the deal with India? Why? Tell me what is the stumbling block there for you. I'll tell you what the stumbling block in general is. As I told you, they've interfered in our electoral process in the past. They have been accused, allegedly, of killing a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil. Some of you might be familiar with the story of Hadib Singh Niger. They describe that person as a terrorist. You know, whether you agree with the characterization of this person, Hadib Singh Niger, as a terrorist or not, the fact still remains India may or may not have orchestrated the assassination of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil. Okay? So there is that, right? And today we have members of the Sikh community in Canada, members of the Sikh community continuing to say that they continue to receive threats, they continue to be molested. I shouldn't use the word molested. I mean, people might assume it means something else. They continue to get threats. Let's just leave it at that. They continue to get threats that may or may not be linked to the government of India. We have extortion rings and gangs running amok in this country. If you live in BC, you probably hear a lot about this, about extortion. I mean, the government just had to announce a new extortion kind of like strategy to fight extortion in this country, right? So we have all these security problems with India. Probably you could argue even worse than we have with China, and you could argue. So that's kind of like my point. Like, so I'm just saying that where people had all these issues with China, with that deal with China, was we can't trust them, was kind of what a lot of people were saying. Why do people why is it that what is the stumbling block is what I want to know here. That's really what I want to drill down to here. What is the stumbling block for you if you are against that India deal? What is the stumbling block for you? Braveheart says Canadians are too high horse and holier than thou to some other countries. I read comments online. Canadians talk about human rights and one crime or another. Well, this is different, is what Braveheart. This is different. And you know why this is different? We're not talking about a crime committed in somebody else's country. We're talking about crimes committed in Canada, right? Now, again, as I said, there is a difference in characterization here. A Canadian citizen was killed on Canadian soil, Hadib Sim Niger. India describes this person as a terrorist, a member of the Khalistan separatists, a militant group that Canada regards as a terrorist group. So this is not a question of holier than thou. This is a question of
of, you can't just, Canada cannot be expected to sit still while, you know, arguably a Canadian citizen, whatever characterization you give the person, is oft on our soil. Right? That infringes on our territorial integrity. Right? That's my point. Braveheart says, although this is not the time to be choosy because Canada needs to beef up its economy. No country is pure. Unless Canada is self-sufficient and wants to be an island, Canada will have to suck up. For me though, I'll be honest with you. I've always been in favor of Canada needs to do more in terms of its own security. We need to, you know, and this has always been my perspective. If you import gangs, extortion rings, if you import criminals, um, that's, I mean, people that are not vetted. I'm not using criminals in the general description that Donald Trump, you've ever heard Donald Trump say. No, I don't worry. I heard myself say it and I was like, this can easily be misconstrued. If you import people with questionable backgrounds, which we've has been exposed in this country that we have done, um, if you expose, if you import gang violence into this country, and we see that manifesting in some of our cities, that is your fault, right? That is your fault. So I think that Canada, we need to do more in terms of as a society to fight these to fight these rings manifesting in our country, right? Now, India's a tough one because in it, I actually just realized that in the apparently according to the government, to federal census in 2021, apparently we have more than 1.8 million Canadians of Indian origin. Right, so we are very, very linked. We're very, very we have very, very strong ties with India. Maybe apart from places like maybe there are very few places around the world that have such strong ties as Canada does to India. So, you know, I, I don't know. Anyways, okay. So Braveheart is saying, I'm saying Canada has no power to be choosy. India has a big economy, so Canada will have to suck it up. Well, so the thing has always been on this particular situation has always been, are Canadians willing to give up their ideals? Because you don't get your ideals back. No, it's hard to get your ideals back once you give it up, right? Canada relies on its reputation as a country that stands for certain things, right? Stands for human rights, stands for you know proper treatment of people in general. That's what we like to stand for in the world, right? Once you give that up and you show that you're willing to give that up for economic gain, then you may run into some problems when you actually need when you want to stand your ground when you want to stand your ground in the future, right? That is the issue. It's sort of like, I explained this maybe with the US example here. it the US credibility on things like the environment, for example, is going to be greatly eroded over the next few years because obviously under the Trump administration they have pulled out of things like the Paris Accord, or some of those climate commitments that everybody agreed to, and basically continue to follow the US leadership on. Canada, for example, put uh, 100% tariff on Chinese-made EVs, following the US example, and we now, because obviously the United States has decided that's not their strategy anymore, Canada had to take another strategy, another approach towards China. So that's what happens, right? That's what happens. Surely Canada will have learned the lesson not to just follow blindly in the United States footsteps. But so you get my point. Is you can't put that ketchup back in the bottle. That's my point. That's my point. So, but the other thing that I've been saying to you guys is, obviously, I think that Canada needs to take responsibility for its own security. We need to do a better job of vetting people coming into this country, but also we need to do a better job in terms of um, equipping law enforcement to be able to handle these incidents. That is the thing, right? That is fundamentally the point I'm making, Braveheart. So there are a few opportunities, and you guys get in the comments. Let me know your thoughts on this. Obviously, there are a few opportunities here that Canada is looking to explore. But that trade, our trade relationship with India is actually is actually really important for us. Um, if that deal that our trade with India as of 2024 was worth like $13 billion. So we send them we send them things like canola. We send them things like fuels, wood pulp, and some of those kinds of things. And I think according to the to the government of Canada website, they send those things like pharmaceutical products, machinery, equipment, and electronics. So that trade as a whole is worth like $13 billion. So it's not chump change for our economy, is what I'm trying to say there. So at this moment, obviously there are opportunities for us to expand, in terms of supplying them agriculture, because obviously India has a huge population and they have a rising middle class that our Canadian export farmers can benefit from. We can send them our canola. We can send them our potash. We can send them some of our agri-food solutions. We can send them as well. So there are opportunities for expansion of trade with India. Is kind of the thing here. So it seems like everybody is fully chummy today. It's interesting. I haven't usually usually I have people come in and tell me you know Braveheart says Canada amuses me sometimes. Internal resources, natural resources are too dirty and not developed. The provinces are divided. It's like a broken country. Make deals, and yet they are stuck on ideals. Wow, that is kind of poetic, though, Braveheart. Make deals, and yet they are. I feel like I need a rap beat on that. Make deals, and yet they are stuck on ideals. I like it. I like it. I like it. But yeah, you make a good point in terms of the internal dilemma that is constantly facing Canadians. We do have this tendency to kind of like hold our nose to everything, like everything stinks, right? One of the places, obviously, I told you guys that the prime minister is going on this trip. He's going to Japan, right? He's going to Japan. And what does Japan want from us? Japan will take our LNG today. If we had enough LNG to send them, Japan will take our LNG today. But just recently, under Carney, we're really starting to take LNG exports more seriously. If we already had this set up, before now, this could have been a substantial source of resource revenue for us in this country. Provinces like British Columbia could have really really benefited from that resource by now. But as Braveheart rightly pointed out, we do have a tendency to kind of hold our nose to things, you know. And even today, you still see people still talking about LNG, with talking bad about LNG. I had cause to have some discussions with NDP voters recently, and NDP voters still categorize LNG as still a no go. It's part of the quote unquote dirty fuels. And it's interesting. It's interesting as a country. We have had we have these critical mineral reserves that we're only just starting to explore. And if not for the crisis, and this is something I guess we need to thank Donald Trump for, if not for the crisis created by Donald Trump, we probably would still have a lot of these critical minerals and LNG just sitting there. So you're right. You're right, Braveheart. And yeah, we do as a country tend to get stuck on ideals as against making deals. You know, But yeah, as I said, it's interesting today that everybody, including Just Eman and Braveheart, seem to agree. Everybody that's commenting, at least, I'm waiting for the one person that's gonna tell me that we shouldn't make a deal with India. You see, I was hoping for that counter argument, but it seems like we all agree. So there's not much to discuss today, I guess. But for those of you who are not live, if you have a different perspective on this deal with India, Isa, okay, Isa is coming in here. Isa says Canada can really be in trouble if a separation from Alberta leaves, because it could also cause a domino effect of Saskatchewan following if they saw their neighbors succeeding. Well, okay. We're bringing up separation. It says Alberta separatism today. Let's just say there is a lot of hurdles in the way for Alberta to leave Canada. It's not even as easy as just a referendum. There are a whole bunch of legal hurdles that they need to jump through in order to make that happen. Okay, it's not as simple. You don't unravel a country with just a little swipe of a pen like that. That's not how that works. And Saskatchewan is actually having a better time of it right now. I mentioned earlier, maybe you were not here, Isa. I mentioned earlier that Scott Moe, who is emerging as a complete stud in this particular time of crisis, Scott Moe is headed to on this trip also with the Prime Minister. He's going to India. Obviously, as I said, there is the opportunity to send agricultural products to India. So Scott Moe is on that trip. Susan Holt of where's that province? I think it's New Brunswick. I think she's New Brunswick. Yeah. I think Susan Holt is New Brunswick. Susan Holt is also going as well, and that's interesting because she's a liberal. So that's kind of a bipartisan kind of like 1-2 punch there. Going with the prime minister to on this particular trade mission. I like that. And Scott Moe, as I said, is emerging right now as an absolute stud. He was there for that China trade mission, and obviously they came back with a deal there. So that I'll get to your comment now. Free Canadian hugs. I like that name though. Free Canadian hugs. You may. But I wish everybody would give free Canadian hugs. Canadian hugs are the best. Anyways, what am I saying? Yeah. So I hope they come back. I hope they come back with something there. But I want to get to your comment here, Isa. Isa says only about 5% or lower in Canada can be used for agriculture. Saskatchewan holds those. Okay. Yeah. So as I said, it's Saskatchewan is the movement for separatism in Saskatchewan is obviously not as loud as the one in Alberta or in Quebec. Really, to be fair, the Alberta one is a bit louder than the one in Quebec right now. The Alberta one seem deeply entrenched, and it's not helped by the fact that it seems like the United States is either goading them, supporting them. It's distasteful. I've said this in the past. It is absolutely disgraceful that the United States would be actively supporting the destabilization of this country. And I know I've seen people online saying it doesn't matter what Carney does, they have made up their mind, which is, I think, kind of a shame because I think there's a lot of good things going on. I spoke about the LNG projects that are being pursued right now. There was also talk about possibly reviving the Keystone XL pipeline. So all of those things. It's a shame that right now, when good things are going on, is when there's so much talk of this Alberta separatism. I think it's a shame. So Isa says if they leave, it will make Canada more reliant on international trade. Yeah, as I said, there is a lot. I think luckily there's a lot. There are lots of hurdles in the way to that will make that a very very tough ask. And I hope it never happens. That's just obviously you guys know my perspective. I'm not a separate. I'm in no way a separatist. I'm in no way in favor of separatism in this country. That's just my thing. So Free Canadian Hugs says the ultimate rule is can you back it up? It would 100% depend on if the United States backed up Alberta separation. And yeah, and that's the thing. The Alberta separatists apparently are seeking $500 billion out of the United States as some sort of financial guarantee for them. Now, the fact that the United States is entertaining that conversation, as I said, is absolutely disgraceful. Those are not you. That's why I keep saying, you know, we love the Americans, we love the American people, but that is an absolute disgrace. It is an absolute disgrace that they're having those conversations. You know, it is an absolute. I mean, this is kind of in conspiracy territory, in conspiracy theory territory, but I have the thought that there's a lot of lobbying, and part of the reason why maybe Canada has chosen not to develop its manufacturing, not to develop its critical minerals or some of these things, might be because or develop its oil for export to Asia and other places where they can get more for it, might just be because they're being lobbied by American interests. Okay, as I said, kind of in conspiracy theory, in conspiracy territory, but that is what it is. That is what I think it is. Because, you know, right now, it seems a little too convenient that when Canada is in the process of trying to find other markets, find a means to be less reliant on the United States, you get this uprising of separatism in Alberta, and they are, as we said, confirmed talking to the United States. You know, it seems a little too convenient. Anyways, Free Canadian Hog says international law is great, but who backs it up? United States military might. Exactly. That is correct. That is correct. All right. Without the United States retaining its place in the world, it's a lot more uncertain. And that is why I think that, you know, Canada needs to, right now, um, Canada needs to, obviously, this is something I think that Carney is already working on, thankfully, on equipping our military, getting our military up to being able to stand up for Canada with a little bit of independence from the United States. We're always going to be intertwined with the United States. We've got, obviously got NORAD and all those things, but we need to be a bit more independent of the United States, especially with the United States taking a more hostile position towards Canada. Um, yeah, so Isa says, I mean, Saskatchewan holds like 40% of those agricultural lands while Alberta holds 30%. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it throws us into a lot of food insecurity if Alberta and Saskatchewan leave. That's clear, right? But I mean, the fact is, as a country, we have everything we need in this country to succeed. As you rightly pointed out, you know, Saskatchewan and Alberta have the agricultural land. Alberta and Saskatchewan still, I think Alberta has a lot of oil as well. They have a lot of oil and gas, also, but most of our reserves, most of our international sales obviously come from Alberta. Um, we know, obviously, as we kind of move along, there's a lot of tech and stuff in Ontario and Quebec. So every single element of this country, we have all the ingredients necessary to be a greater country than what we are, right? And I personally, I would not give up any of those parts because I think it makes us weaker. So let's hope, Isar, for me, for all our sakes, that there are enough hurdles in the way, and not just hurdles, but I think that Makani, I think personally, I've always felt the position of the federal government should be to put the conditions in place for every single province to succeed at what they do. Right now, obviously, we need a coherent national strategy, but I think the role of the government, of the federal government, has to be to put things in place for every single province to succeed. Okay, every single province to succeed, and they should be a mediator between provinces like BC and Alberta to be able to come to an agreement that works for everybody, or at least an agreement that keeps both parties halfway happy. That's what I want to see. Brevard says, even if it is hard for Alberta to leave right now, the threat of leaving and the broken stuff can destabilize the country. Something needs to change about this current Canadian system. You know, Alberta is kind of a little bit hurting itself because as this separatism topic continues to advance, if it becomes a thing where it actually goes to a referendum, that could impact investments in Alberta today, because there is a certain stability that is conferred on Alberta by the stability of Canada, and if it becomes clear over the next few months that Alberta is maybe not going to be a part of Canada in the future, maybe there is a little bit of, you know, opera coming in the future. They might see a lot of investment flights from the province, and they might find that they regret that in the future. They might find that they regret that in the future. Never mind the fact that there are lots of projects hinging on Canada, on Alberta being a part of Canada right now in among the nation building projects. I think that now it's not the time. It is. I think the separatism topic is a little bit silly right now. Anyways, Free Canadian Hug says Saskatchewan holds most of our potash and uranium, as well as it leads Canada in agricultural technology. Yes, that is true. Yes, that's no, I agree with that. Saskatchewan isn't just farmland and cattle. I agree with that. I agree with that. Uh, Saskatchewan is also, as I said, every single province in this country has a kind of a, and we're lucky like that. And I don't think as a country we realize just how lucky we are. Every single province in this country brings something to the table that is just tremendous. And I think, as I said, the role of the federal government has to be to, and I think this federal government probably gets it. Their role needs to be to facilitate every single province being able to succeed, every single province being able to deliver at the highest clip. That is the role I think the federal government should take. Braveheart says, Mr. Wolf, please don't blame the US. Canada needs to fix it. If Canada has a whole country, the United States won't be able to manipulate itself in Canada's system. And Canada's system needs to be better. Yes, Canada's system needs to be better. However, you have to realize we live next door to the biggest power in the history of the world. Okay, they are going to have some influence, and you hope that they are nice enough not to try and influence us negatively. I mean, people underestimate just how much influence the United States has. They partly control our media a little bit. When you think about it, um, they own maybe about over 100, like just Post Media, for example, the company that owns like National Post, Ottawa Citizen, all those companies, they own like over 100 like media organizations in this country. So right away, just from that, United States interests can possibly control our narrative, our discussions in this country. Okay, some of our newly announced nation building project, the Silisms LNG project, is actually owned by the United States. It's owned by a United States company, Western LNG, I think is the name of the company. So yeah, I want to go faster with the comments. Actually, I'm being a bit slow. Okay, so let's go a bit faster, guys. I apologize. I'm talking a bit. Okay, so Free Canadian Hug says, I don't live in Alberta. I still think the way the federal government has been treating Alberta is disgusting. Well, the federal, I don't think. Hmm, which are you talking about? Free Canadian Hugs? Are you talking about the federal government under Justin Trudeau, or the federal government under Mark Carney? Because under Mark Carney, through the MOU that the federal government signed with Alberta, some of the things, the bad laws, the 9 bad laws that Daniel Smith pointed to, a lot of those have been addressed, right? Things like the clean energy regulations have been removed. There's active work towards possibly constructing a pipeline. Even under Justin Trudeau, for that matter, Alberta got the TMX pipeline expansion. Granted, there were laws, and here's the other thing. Today, Alberta produces more oil than it ever has in its history. So, and sure, BC stands in the way of them being able to get more of that to other markets, but BC's interests matter too, right? Because people say Alberta is being treated badly, but you got to realize that BC's interests matter too, and they have interest in preserving their waterways. That is their prerogative, right? So, but what is disgusting a little bit is the way people make derogatory remarks about Alberta's resource. That there is a general rhetoric coming especially from central Canada, from obviously Quebec, from the Maritimes. People saying that Alberta sells dirty oil. Meanwhile, a province like Quebec imports said dirty oil from the United States. Okay, that's a little bit hypocritical, right? Um, the provinces, you have people describing Alberta's oil as dirty, and this is that it's like you insult the people of Alberta's livelihood, and call basically call their money the works of their hand dirty money, and yet when their taxes go to the federal government and those taxes get paid out to provinces like Quebec in equalization payments. Quebec receives 50% of the equalization payments in this country off taxes that a lot of those taxes Alberta punches above his weight in terms of taxes paid. Obviously, you guys have heard of the Alberta's high GDP per capita. It is those sorts of rhetoric I think that annoys Albertans a bit more, right? There's no sometimes there's no good faith dialogue. I think sometimes with Albertans in terms of you know like the whole BC discussion, for example. There's a lot there. I could go on, but let's pause there because I want to catch up on the comments. Braveheart says it isn't disgraceful. It is business. Didn't they buy Alaska on something like that? It is business investment. Canada is the dumb one for allowing itself to be lobbied. Let's stop blaming the U.S. for this. Look, when they bought Alaska, now when the United States bought Alaska off of Russia, that would have been in the early 1990s, right? Sorry, no, not 1990s, but in the early 18th century, I want to say, um, early 1900s. I want to say. I don't remember the exact date of this particular purchase, but if someone knows, you can put it in the comments. That was a long time ago. That was a long time ago, and that was a business transaction, right? Now it is different to it's like saying, I mean, there's no hostile takeover in the same way as maybe the CIA infiltrating countries and destabilizing countries as they've done elsewhere, but it kind of is a hostile takeover where you you are basically giving you're emboldening a certain movement that has the potential to destabilize a country. That's what I mean when I say it is disgraceful. Isa says, yeah, Canada can only be strong if provinces work together harmonically. But right now, we're too divided among ourselves, and the US is taking advantage of the chaos. They are. Point made. Braveheart says, I don't support your opinion of blaming the US. Canada is to blame here. I'm not saying that Canada does not hold the biggest responsibility here. Canada does hold the biggest responsibility. However, the United States is doing quite a bit of you know dirty boxing going on here. Uh, Braveheart says, so you think inviting foreign military men into Canada is wise? There is a lot of Somali pirates, for example, that might think that's a good deal that might not be loyal to Canada. Oh, okay. No, I don't think inviting Somali pirates into Canada is wise. When did I say inviting Somali pirates into Canada is wise, man? I never said that. Uh, okay, so Isa says even in war, historically, your own soldiers can betray and switch sides. if the other side can offer better or more food. Mm, So you're saying, Isa, that like that Canada needs to. I think what I'm interpreting here, you're saying, is that Canada needs to do more in terms of 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 giving Albertans a reason to stay, as against all this criticism. I guess is what you're trying to say. Free Canadian Hug says, and based on the screening in the last 10 years, I doubt the screening for military applicants will be any different than what we're already doing. We have drive-by shootings we never had before. Actually, it's interesting. That gives me a reason to talk about something else. Free Canadian Hugs. So apparently, the Canadian military is recruiting from. It's not. It's recruiting foreigners. And I think I don't know. I'm not too familiar with the recruitment process. Maybe they've always done this, but apparently the Canadian military is recruiting foreigners. So that was something I found interesting. I just learned just learned of that recently, and I wonder if somebody has some knowledge of the Canadian military's recruitment a little bit. It's interesting. I saw that apparently the Canadian military is recruiting foreigners, which I never knew that was a thing. Um, but it's presumably because they need more manpower, and like-minded countries, the places like Australia, the UK, some people from those countries can come to this country, without as much of the security risk. Um, Isa says losing a large amount of our food resource can lead to many problems to both survival, the economy, and security. Yeah, of course. Free Canadian Hawks lives in BC. Shout out to my BC friend there. I also live in BC. And that ties obviously into my whole comment about, do Canadians even want a trade deal with India? That was the original topic we started. I know we've gone down a bit of a rabbit hole, and I allowed that because I want to have a discussion with you guys. I want to have that discussion. I want to have that discussion with you guys. But obviously, in BC, and people who live in BC are familiar with the details of this. There's a lot of extortion. We currently have a task force in BC trying to address that particular crisis in the oh yes, Republic of Alberta, you're here, my guy. I was waiting for you to come and defend Alberta, my guy. Okay, um Free Canadian Hug says that's not true. BC doesn't have the final say in ports. Ports is under federal jurisdiction. I'm what I'm saying, Free Canadian Hugs, is that yes, while while the federal government does have a final say, however, the way we do things in this country allows for. I mean, you're asking the federal government to basically override the wishes of the province. How do you think that's going to go down? I don't know. How do you think that's going to go down? And right now the federal government is also working on getting the cooperation of the indigenous of the First Nations, and those people, those interests have also said, well, if Canada, if they choose to force a pipeline towards the north coast of BC, then other projects might be in danger. Now, I would prefer for those that not to be the escalation in these discussions, but here we are, right? Here we are. Uh, Republic of Alberta says Alberta's bitumen is steam extracted and is the cleanest in the world. Okay. It's the cleanest on earth. And free Canadian Hugs there says dirty gas and oil. It was very, very interesting to me that, I mean, I get when people say, oh, crude is dirty, but I had NDP voters coming at me telling me, oh, Canada should not even be selling its LNG because this was something that they're probably the person who's going to win the NDP leadership. This was something that he said. Avi Lewis. Avi Lewis was saying that even LNG is too dirty, and I was like, Canada does LNG the cleanest way possible, and if you can agree that we possibly have a chance to displace coal or further expansion of coal in places like China. Japan is asking for our LNG. Then why wouldn't you do that? LNG emits maybe like 40 to 60% less than coal. Why wouldn't you do that? Oh yeah. So Free Canadian Hubs is saying, explain to me how you think we produce clean energy. It is very interesting because when you look at that, some of you know I'm a scientist focused on some of these things, right? Yes, when you look at things like extraction of the critical minerals that go into like your batteries, for example, for energy storage, you'll find you'll find that clean energy is not as clean as people think it is. So I will say that and leave that with you guys. Free Canadian Hog says he lives near site C, and you want to tell me that is clean? You have no idea how much environmental danger, how much environmental damage it has done if you think that is clean. Yes, and Free Canadian Hog is coming in with a lot of information here, saying solar is clean. You know how much pollution is created in creating those panels, and what do you think they do with their waste products? You are absolutely correct. You're hitting all the right notes, Free Canadian Hugs. You're hitting all the right notes because and that is the problem, I think, fundamentally with a lot of these far lefts, overly, I don't want to describe them with the wrong word because I know they'll come for me. um, but any of these far left voters, that is the problem with them. They fail to understand how the technology works, and so they think that, so they wrongly ascribe, clean to what isn't. You probably have some of these NDP voters will probably be against things like nuclear energy. You'll be surprised, right? You would absolutely blow your top off. But that's what it is. And the Republic of Alberta is saying billions would die without petrochemical polymers. You can't even make fertilizer without carbon. I mean, fertilizer is kind of carbon. Well, it depends on type of fertilizer, I guess. It depends on the type of fertilizer. You're right. There's also like the other ones as well. Anyways, that I'm trying. You're trying to call on my biology knowledge there, man. Don't do me like that live on air. You're gonna make me have to think about this thing. Anyways, Free Canadian Hugs says you said that McCartney is building up the military. His latest plan is to open a path for immigrants with military training to immigrate to Canada. Yes. I I I I the way I understood it was obviously with military there needs to be a little bit more background checks, a little bit more vetting of these people, not just taking anybody into our military. Last thing I want to see, last thing I want to see is for the Canadian government to say we're taking a whole bunch of, obviously, I don't, we're talking about India today, but last thing I want to see is for them to, because obviously we have all these security um issues that need addressing with India at the moment. The last thing I want to see is for them to go, okay, here's a whole bunch of visas to people from India that are not properly vetted. It's not particularly an Indian thing, but it's just in general. They need to vet people before bringing people into this country. If you cannot vet them, please do not put them in our military. Okay, so Republic of Alberta says Albertans are not funding foreign mercenaries. Free Canadian Hawk says we have never recruited foreign military immigrants before. I don't know. This was something I saw come out recently. Apparently, they are trying to recruit from friendly nations, maybe places like Australia. But I need to do a bit more research on that. I was wondering if someone knew about that. But that was something I saw recently. Um, Free Canadian Hawk says no, it is so that the federal government can spend money on wages instead of equipment, as the wages are taxed and the money cycles through the economy. Interesting. That's an interesting point. Free Canadian Hugs also says if we buy equipment from the USA, that money leaves our country for. Oh, okay. So you're saying that the whole point They want to make a show of spending all this money on the military, but really what is kind of a ploy to get it's kind of a ploy to get back um the get to recruit to recoup that back in terms of income tax. Interesting idea. Interesting idea. I want to go a bit faster because okay, I'm actually coming to the end of you guys' comments, so maybe I don't need to go as fast. Free Canadian Hog says crude is split into many parts and used to create many products. For example, your glass lenses. Wow, Free Canadian Hugs. Are you a science person? Are you a science guy? Are you a science guy like me? No, no. That's been you're coming in with some. As I say, you're coming in with some pearls today. I like it. I like it. I like it. I wish you should join our conversations more often. This is my first time having this kind of one on one with you, but um, for those of you who don't know, who are new here, we have these conversations. We have these conversations actually, typically our normal live show is on a Sunday, but sometimes when something happens or I just want to have more of a discussion with you guys that come live. So obviously, the reason why we're live today is because the Prime Minister Carney is off to India starting tomorrow, and I thought it might be interesting to talk about people's reservations, if they have any, regarding this particular regarding the possibility of a trade deal being struck with India. So that's why we came live today. Um, okay, so Republic of Alberta has also given us some science knowledge here. It says potassium chloride and carbon are required for fertilizer. Okay. AKA Free Canadian Hug says AKA potash. Just Iman says the Canadian military doesn't recruit foreigners. That is false, Wolf. Okay. As I said, I need to do more research on that. This was something I saw. Um, maybe actually, let me see. Uh, see if I can quickly Google this. Is the Canadian military trying to recruit? Let's see. Let's see if this is something. This is one of those things that just appears on the internet, and then you have to. Is the Canadian military trying to recruit foreigners? Oh, just even. You might be wrong on this one. It is saying, just off of Google here, it's saying Canada is actively creating pathways to bring in foreign military professionals, but it is not recruiting any foreigner to join the Canadian Armed Forces. The current approach is targeted and tied to immigration policy and focused on filling critical skills shortages. Wow. Wow. So so it says here they're targeting. So the CAF is seeking foreign military members with hard to replace skills such as F-35 fighter pilots, doctors and nurses with military experience, and other specialized operational roles. So just even it looks like it is happening, man. It looks like it is happening. As I said, this was something I just saw off the corner of my eye, and I was quite curious about it. So, but obviously, I am not putting that information out there. I just wanted to know if anybody had heard about that as well. If I am, if that is something that we can always have a further conversation once we do a bit more research. Uh, Okay, so Free Canadian Hug says India has massive refineries and want to keep making massive profits. Yes, okay. Alberta and Saskatchewan are not going to leave. Ain't happening. Says Polar Vortex. Yes, Polar Vortex says Canada has traded with India for years. But yes, I guess my whole point is there is room for expansion of that trade, and obviously we've had a lot of we've had recently as recently as 2023 we had a lot of you know quarrel we had a quarrel with them over the fact that they may or may not have murdered a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil, and it led to a whole bunch of Trudeau made an accusation, the Indian government denied it, called it a political gimmick, with Trudeau trying to save his political career. We expelled some diplomats on our side. They replied, that kind of thing, right? So now Carney is trying to reestablish contact and create possibly avenues for expansion of that trade relationship. Right now, you're up to date. So, uh, Free Canadian Hug says, so we have a bargaining chip with India to encourage more moral behaviors. I don't know if you can control the morals of foreign countries, man. Here's what I would prefer. We can't control the morals of India, and I think that is a yeah, that is you don't shouldn't have the expectation that you will control that. I think that what we need to expect and demand of any person with any country we're trading with is you shouldn't kill Canadian citizens on Canadian soil. I don't know. I don't know how I can say this more. Now, Canada needs to do a better job of protecting its own citizens. We need to do better on our security, on our domestic security. These extortion rings should not be running amok in this country. They should not be able to threaten Canadian citizens, molest Canadian citizens. You know, that is a fact. That is a fact. Part of India's accusation against Canada is that Canada supports the Sikh separatists within their country, the people who want to see an independent state of Khalistan. Okay. Now, whether personally, I yeah. So Polar Vortex says, "Don't murder people." That is my only ask out of India. Don't murder people in my country. You can do whatever the fuck you want in your country, but don't murder people in my country. Is that too much to ask? Is that too much to ask? You know, don't murder people. That should be like item one of any trade agreement we sign with India. Do not murder people in my country. It's as simple as that. Anyways, okay, so okay. Let me skip the fertilizer talk. Free Canadian Hug says, "LOL, we're going to recruit F-35 fighters that the USA military spent hundreds of millions." Yeah, so it was funny. As I said, it's kind of hilarious when you see it though. Like we're recruiting. I mean, it could be that we're recruiting US fighter pilots. We could be recruiting from the United States military. I mean, so don't just assume that we're gonna recruit somebody from like a third world country to come and fly these F-35s. Okay, just don't assume the worst. Don't assume the worst. Free Canadian Hugs. Uh, Free Canadian Hugs also says, trading with India is something to explore as it could replace China in manufacturing, and it will take a very long time for India to get there, to get to where China is at the moment. But India they have that steam, and I like the strategy of Makani. Makani has signed a deal with Indonesia. I want to say was the other country with kind of a large industrial base like that we signed with. I like the India deal. I think we should sign a deal with India, but as I said, there needs to be a lot of work. Okay, I'll get to your comments soon. Republic of Alberta. Um, what else is here? What else is here? So we're already at the end of our hour here. So I'm just gonna round up right now. You guys instead of talking about the India deal, you guys wanted to talk about a whole bunch of other things, and I'm happy to. This is what these live hours are for. You guys, we get to talk about stuff. And if you see something online, as I said, I saw the whole like United States, Canada, the Canadian Armed Forces recruiting from abroad thing. I was surprised by that. We had that discussion. These are the kind of things I enjoy, having these conversations with you guys. That is the purpose of the live hour. So I really appreciate you guys getting in the comments. I want to round up. So I'm going to read. Let's see. What else can I read here? Um, Okay, so Free Canadian Hug says you can force change in trading partners that need something from you. Do you think China has not changed the opinions of trading partners? When was the last time you heard free Tibet? No, that has to be comment of the night though. I get that. No, You've been dropping some pearls in this entire show, but I gotta give you that one. That was there is a lot of, obviously a lot of manipulation. And China is known for using trade as a way to kind of frame conversations. Once you get tied into a deal with China, suddenly you find yourself you can't comment on certain things anymore. That's the way she goes. That's the way she goes. That's why I think if Canada is going to maintain this high horse, as Braveheart said at once upon a time in the comment section, if Canada is going to maintain this high horse, we need to create some leverage. We need to create some might. You can't just say, don't do that. You know, on what authority? Who are you? you know, why should I listen to you? That's what some of these countries will be saying, right? So but as I say, we need to. I think Carney is going the right direction in terms of putting Canada in a better position. Certainly better than where Trudeau left it. Uh, Republic of Alberta says American pilots are not trained for Arctic warfare. And also says these pilots have their own homeland to live in and need to go home. Sorry. They have their own homeland and need to go home. Okay, I'm sorry. Because it took me a while there, I'm not really sure what you're referring to as they. Isa says Palestine having more recognition than both Tibet and Taiwan, who are more peaceful and productive. That's funny. That's funny. No, I wouldn't say Palestine. To be fair, I wouldn't say Palestine has more recognition than Taiwan. I mean, on what basis? On what basis, Isa? On what basis? I'm not really sure what you're basing that recognition on. Taiwan is pretty well recognized. They make a lot of some of the chips and I mean through Taiwan semiconductor they make some of the cutting edge stuff that go into your computers and AI technology and all that stuff, right? Taiwan is recognized as they're recognized. I'm not sure what you mean when you say Taiwan has more recognition than places like Taiwan. Okay. Anyways, Republic of Alberta says Canada would be better off hiring Russian pilots. Oh my god! I already gave away comments of the night, Republic of Alberta. What are you doing to me here? What are you doing to me? What are you doing to me? Uh, that's actually funny. That is funny. No, no, please don't hire Russian pilots, please. Uh, yeah. So okay. So Polar Vortex says not that I'm in V. What is V? Uh, favor or oh, not that I'm in favor of it. My cat is helping me. That's funny. Okay, free Canadian hugs, and I'll just read those last two comments, and we can get out of here. We've gone over our time today. Uh, free Canadian hug says Taiwan is the new Hong Kong, and says every country wants their wealth, technology, and people. Wow, great conversation, you guys. Great conversation. I really, really enjoyed the conversation today. It was actually very lively. We talk in very very many directions. I love that. I love that. Actually, we should do this more. Um, obviously, and I'm going to round up now. The prime minister is also, as I said, not just India, and I expect that maybe a trade deal will materialize in this particular trip. Otherwise, why is he going? Um, so the prime minister is on his way to India. He'll go to Japan. Japan, presumably, there's an opportunity there for Canada to send more LNG or some LNG. I don't even know if we send LNG to Japan right now, but we should. They want our LNG. So the prime minister is off to Japan as well. So there's an opportunity there. The prime minister is off to Australia, and with Australia is kind of a different sort of structured agreement in the sense that Australia has many of the same kind of like critical mineral resource that we have. And so in 2025, I want to say in October of 2025, Canada signed a sort of a joint development agreement where we'll share our information, our knowledge on how to get these resources out of the ground and into the hands of people that need them. So there is potential for deeper collaboration on things like security as well with Australia. Yeah. So there is McCartney might be coming back with a lot of goodies, and I hope there is a lot of goodies coming out of this trip abroad. I liked that he came back with something from China. As you guys know, I'm not against the EV deal we signed with China. I like that it helps the farmers in Saskatchewan. Anyways, that was the live hour today. I want to just roll the credits real quick. I'll try and get through as many people that were here as possible. Free Canadian Hugs, Polar Vortex, Republic of Alberta, Isa, you were here as well. Just Eamon was also here today. Braveheart was also here. So I think I got everybody, but you guys were very, 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 very involved today, and I like that. I like that. So as you guys know, the live hour, our typical usual show, is on Sunday at 4 p.m. Pacific time. So join me then. If you're new to the channel, obviously subscribe, hit that like button, and